Hello and welcome, little squids. I am back today with another list video. Today we're going to be talking about the 7 motorcycles that need to be updated. I am here with more free advice so that you don't go and blow your whole piggy bank on a bike that is outdated, out of touch, or just a damn ripoff compared to other bikes in the class. These bikes are rivaled by contemporaries that are rocking either better tech, better performance, better styling, or all three. I will try my best not to have every bike on the list be from Suzuki, but no promises. They just have so many dinosaurs in their lineup, it is hard to resist. A big shout out to today's sponsor, Cardo. We'll talk a little bit more about them later in the show, but without further ado, let's get on with our list. First up in our number 1 spot is the Suzuki Boulevard S40. Okay, it's hard to believe that this bike even exists in the year of our Lord 2022. It has a carburetor, sure, not ideal, but also not unheard of from Suzuki, but more shocking is that it still has a rear drum brake that is 1960s technology. It feels like it should be illegal for a motorcycle to have a drum brake at this point. The S40 is a simple entry-level cruiser that is in fact so stripped down that the key features Suzuki touts on their website are all related to the paint, black handlebars, black lower fork legs, blacked out engine, so on and so forth. When getting to the engine specs, one of the most highlighted features is an electronic starter. My guy, this bike was last updated in 2019 model year. I would really hope it has an electronic starter. Cue all the kickstart simps leaving me a comment right now. There are literally self-driving cars. You'd think that $5,799 could get you a little more motorcycle than the S40 delivers. I mean, for that money, you can get a Duke 390 with a TFT display. This bike is an entry-level cruiser with an air-cooled 652cc single cylinder that makes 31 horsepower and 37 foot-pounds of torque. It has a really low 26-inch seat height and weighs only 381 pounds, so it is definitely an approachable bike, but after a week of riding it around in a parking lot, just about any rider would start to feel like their money could have been better spent on a slightly more advanced motorcycle. Similarly, number 2 on our list is the Yamaha V-Star 250, another outdated entry-level cruiser. The V-Star came out in 2008 to replace the Virago 250 and has been mostly unchanged since then. While it isn't arguably a more attractive motorcycle than the S40, it is destined to suffer with the same rudimentary components. It has a Mikuni carb and a rear drum brake. It has a 249cc V-twin that makes a measly 21 horsepower and 15 foot-pounds of torque. It might be the babiest V-twin I've ever seen. It only weighs 324 pounds, which is definitely light for a cruiser, but it still has a lower power to weight ratio than you'd find in a dual sport motorcycle like a CRF 300 or a KLX 300. The V-Star 250 costs just $4,599, and that can get up to 78 miles per gallon. So if you're looking for just an urban commuter that's a step up from a scooter or a moped, maybe the V-Star is worth considering. But if you want a motorcycle with a fun and sporty nature that is capable of riding roads beyond dense city streets, it probably makes sense to look for a bike elsewhere. The most worthy motorcycle in the entry-level cruiser world is definitely the Honda Rebel 300. It uses the same single-cylinder liquid-cooled 286cc engine you'd find in the CBR 300 and the CRF 300L. Not only is it fuel-injected and has disc brakes in front and rear, it also has a slip-assist clutch and a 6-speed transmissions. These features that makes it leaps and bounds ahead of Suzuki and Yamaha in the entry-level cruiser category for only $4,699. Rebel 300's a bit of a sleeper hit. Since we're on the topic of entry-level motorcycles that just can't seem to content with their rivals in their class, number 3 on the list of motorcycles that need an update is the Suzuki Gixxer 250. The Gixxer is surprisingly capable at a few unlikely things like scrambling on dirt and taking bullets to the gas tank, but it still falls significantly short compared to similar motorcycles like the Ninja 400. The Gixxer 250 makes 24 horsepower and 17 foot-pounds of torque from its 248cc parallel twin engine, while still managing to weigh just shy of 400 pounds. Compare that to a motorcycle like the Ninja 400, which makes over twice the horsepower and weighs 30 pounds less, and you'll probably reconsider the Gixxer as your pick for the entry-level sport bike. It seems like the brain-trusted Suzuki needs to go back to the drawing board, lest the Gixxer 250 that leaves the factory be doomed to share the same fate as the wretched monstrosity that was our former shop bike. Also, this bike has a steel cradle frame. Cradle frame on an entry-level beginner sport bike. What are we doing, Suzuki? What's going on? But if you're stuck riding around on some abysmal bike like the Gixxer, you might as well have the sweet sounds of Dido's thank you to dry your tears, thanks to a shiny new Cardo. You already know they're the best in the business when it comes to motorcycle comm system, and they're our preferred choice. You can get their Pack Talk Edge or one of the beginner-friendly Spirit systems down over on shop.yamd.co, where every dollar you spend is an entry to win one of our giveaway bikes. Certified 100% up to date on the Cardos, except for that Gixxer maybe. Okay, we'll lay off Suzuki for a minute and let Honda feel the cold scalpel that is a spot on a Yami Noob list video. And number 4 on our list is the Honda XR650L. This dual sport motorcycle is kinda cool. It is reminiscent of a different era of analog enduro motorcycling, but in comparison to other bikes in the style, it is definitely in need of an update beyond a change in color scheme, but we'll get to why it hasn't been updated in a long time. The XR650L was actually first released by Honda in 1993 and has remained relatively unchanged since then. It actually holds the title for the longest running production motorcycle. It has an air-cooled 644cc thumper that makes 40 horsepower and 47 foot-pounds of torque using the same engine from 1988 and chassis from 1985. This reluctance to update the bike is likely influenced by stricter emissions regulations that can be avoided when older motorcycles are grandfathered into a current model lineup. In this instance, they are less susceptible to the scrutiny that newly developed engines must undergo, but unfortunately for the 650, the landscape of dual sport and adventure motorcycles has changed a lot since 1993. Honda's own CRF 300L and CRF 450L are perfect examples of what a modern contemporary dual sport motorcycle can look, feel, and ride like. These bikes are fuel injected and capable of performing both on and off-road. They have a nicer fit and finish than their larger displacement forefather that might beg the question whether or not the increase in displacement is worth the sacrifice. The XR650L could be the foundation for an apocalypse spec ADV bike, but it is unfortunately limited to a 5-speed gearbox and doesn't have anywhere near the amount of ADV bells and whistles that these similar bikes like the KLR 650 or Tenere 700 do. It would be really cool to see Honda reinvent the XR650L as a powerful enduro spec dual sport like the KTM 690 Enduro R, or even a factory supermoto like the SMCR or 701 from Husky. But hey, at that point, it would probably be a little too out there for Honda, and it would likely double the price point. As it stands now, a Honda XR650L can be had for $6,999 on the showroom floor, and you can actually see these on the showroom floor next to brand new bikes. It is super weird to see such a dinosaur on a brand new motorcycle showroom floor. What, did you think Kawasaki would manage to evade my scrutiny today? Number 5 on our list of motorcycles that need to be updated is the Kawasaki Vulcan 900. The cruiser world has seen a lot of action lately as manufacturers likely want to cater to young riders who want to be flirting with their cruiser life, but don't want to drop nearly 20 grand on a big lump of leather and chrome. Bikes like the Indian Scout, Honda Rebel 1100, and the Yamaha Bolt all offer modern stylistic packages and acknowledge that a cruiser doesn't need to be dreadfully underpowered. The Vulcan 900 costs $8,499 from Kawasaki. It is their middleweight cruiser offering coming in at 903 cc's. It has a liquid-cooled 55-degree V-twin that puts down 50 horsepower and 57 foot-pounds of torque and weighs a whopping 620 pounds, wet and ready to ride. Those are looking like Harley-Davidson numbers, but bikes from Harley have a style and character you won't get from a metric cruiser like a Vulcan. It has spoked wheels with white wall tires, chrome exhaust, and some of the biggest and widest handlebars I have ever seen in my life. One of the paint options is referred to as robotic white, and that's really what it feels like, a cold, lifeless motorcycle trying to emulate the character nostalgia Harley has always been able to capitalize on. Most other manufacturers have realized the need to develop cruiser-style motorcycles that don't just try to mimic a Harley-Davidson, but instead reinvent the form in their own unique style. Hell, even Harley realized they needed to reinvent their bikes as a result, developed the Sportster and the new Nightster. The Yamaha Bolt was a pretty successful attempt for a Japanese manufacturer to design a heritage-inspired V-twin motorcycle that didn't rely on blinding their potential customers with so much chrome that they couldn't make out the power figures on the spec sheet. The Bolt costs only $100 more than the Vulcan at $8,599. It has a 942cc V-twin engine that makes 65 horsepower and 59 foot-pounds of torque. It looks pretty cool with black mag wheels and a solo seat. An even better example of a reinvented modern cruiser is the Rebel 1100 from Honda. It uses a 1084cc parallel twin engine in place of a V-twin, which you might come to expect from a cruiser. It makes 86 horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque, and it rides really nice like some sort of flicky, weird, low naked bike. It's a modern, blacked-out aesthetic, rider modes, cruise control, and piggyback Showa shocks in the rear. The Rebel costs a little bit more, $9,399, but you will receive so much more motorcycle in return. For how limited Kawasaki's cruiser lineup is, it would be cool for them to bring more to the table and make the Vulcan compete with the cruisers from other manufacturers. And honestly, we just want to see an H2 Vulcan. That would be pretty sweet. Also, it sounds awesome. It sounds like a missile or something. You know we had to do it to him. Next up is the Suzuki DRZ 400. I can't make a list of motorcycles that need to be updated and not mention the DRZ. What is still regarded as a formidable and worthy dual sport motorcycle, the DRZ is stifled by the sins of the past. In production and mostly unchanged since 2000, that's starting to look a little vintage at this point with all the Zoomers wearing Y2K stuff. The DRZ has a carbureted, liquid-cooled 398cc engine, single-cylinder that makes 34 horsepower and 26 foot-pounds of torque. It is by no means incapable, but it is definitely limited during long-distance use by its 5-speed gearbox. It aesthetically looks very much like a product of the early 2000s, which was not known for being a particularly stylish era with Jinko jeans and Vote for Pedro shirts. Looking down to the cockpit on the DRZ, and you can see it is still rocking the equivalent of a T9 graphing calculator for a gauge cluster. It is available in supermoto trim from the factory, which is pretty cool, but all that means is it utilizes inverted forks and 17-inch street wheels with street tires. Suzuki's been selling these bikes for forever, so they have long met the return on investment for research and development. So if people keep buying them, why spend the time, money, and resources on substantial updates? Similar to the XR650L, Suzuki probably knows that the current engine likely wouldn't meet EPA regulations, and as a result, only implement minimal changes each year, most notably, bold new graphics. The 2023 model year now comes in yellow. Very Suzuki. I would really love to live in a world where Suzuki makes a DRZ 500 to compete with the likes of the KTM EXC 500 and the Husqvarna FE 501 like the bike that I have, but I have very, very, very little doubts they will ever do that. The last bike on our list coming in at spot number 7 is the Yamaha TW 200. I didn't really mean for this to turn into a dual sport list, but I guess other styles of motorcycles, specifically sport bikes, are inherently more competitive by their nature and thus less prone to the set it and forget it mentality that motorcycle manufacturers seem to be having with their dual sport lineups. The TW 200 is a funny little bike. You can commonly find them being used in the MSF bike. They have a huge goofy tires you might find on an ATV or a wheelbarrow. They are a reliable and super approachable bike with a low seat height for a dual sport, but it is blighted with many of the shortcomings that plague other simpler starter motorcycles on our list, like coming equipped with a carburetor and a drum brake in the rear. It is an air-cooled 198cc single-cylinder engine that makes 16 horsepower and 11 foot-pounds of torque. Aside from the huge tires, it still looks pretty goofy with a big square headlight, huge parts bin turn signals, round mirrors, and an off-brand Timex in terms of the speedometer. It'd be cool to see Yamaha update this bike a little bit and make it more functional beyond farm duty and MSF classes. Since Yamaha has discontinued the WR250R, which is still the dumbest thing they've ever done in my opinion, maybe we'll see them show a little bit of love to the TW200 and the XT250, as they are the sole survivors of their dual sport lineup. Fact. The American Public Power Association says that squirrels are the most frequent cause of power outages in the US. The APPA even developed a data tracker called the Squirrel Index that analyzes the patterns and timings of squirrels' impacts on electrical systems. Turns out the peak times for the years for squirrel attacks are from May to June and October to November. Goodbye.
Keep watching.